So in this segment, we're going to be talking about car makers' warn on EU threat to electric vehicle prices, about EU tariffs. I found the framing a bit sus in this article. I'm not going to lie, it's not the best, but it's an interesting article. I struggle to really make a lot out of it in terms of figuring out what it all means, purely because it's quite complicated. A lot of the points, and it's more in towards politics rather than economics. But I think it was worth a read and probably worth a listen. Probably, but I am biased. So Brussels refuses to extend rules of origins exemptions agreed in the Brexit trade deal. So car makers have warned that the price of many electric vehicles made or sold in the UK and Europe could jump 10% or more from 2024 after Brussels said it would not extend tariff exemptions agreed in the Brexit trade deal, so the TCA. So framing not the best. Brussels has ruled out an extension, but the UK has not asked for an extension either. So we can assume that the UK's position on this right now is we don't want an extension, or at least not willing to ask for one. So the framing is not the best. You can kind of stick this on the UK for not asking for an extension. The UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement temporarily exempted electric vehicles from rules stating that products must be substantially made in Britain or the bloc to qualify for the EU's zero tariff, zero quota regime, because such a large proportion of electric vehicles' batteries are imported from Asia. This bit does annoy me. The industry knew about the deadlines set for the exemptions. They have some good arguments we'll discuss later, but the industry has not done the best in terms of manufacturing as much as they can in Europe. But I guess the industry has had a pandemic and a global chip shortage to deal with, which was more of their concern, so I won't be too mean to them. Both the UK and EU manufacturing groups are asking for the rules of origin exemptions to be extended from December 31st, 2023, because there are not enough batteries and precursor chemicals currently being made in Europe. If London and Brussels do not agree to a change, many electric vehicles moving between the two, so the EU and the UK, would face a 10% tariff, increasing prices for consumers. 10% is a lot depending on the price of the vehicle you're looking at. The European battery industry is simply not taken off quickly enough to keep in line with more restrictive rules, said a spokesperson for the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, which means EU car makers, what is more given the recent spike in prices of raw materials, which make up most of the non-European content of a battery, is becoming increasingly challenging to meet the rules of origins for batteries. So effectively saying raw materials have gone up in price, so putting additional tariffs on the industry wouldn't be a good idea. It looks like one of the major issues the industry is facing as a whole is the industry wasn't ready for Brexit. A lot of different things go into a car. The car industry is blaming the chemical industry. It's interesting. I'm not sure what issues there are on the EU side for chemicals, but on the UK side, it's been a shambles. The agency that deals with chemical registration is not set up properly, which means it's hard to actually register anything with them. Given the nature of electric vehicles, it was always going to be a challenge to manufacture most of the car parts in Europe. That's why only a percentage of the car has to be made from parts in Europe. I'm not sure fully what to make of this situation. 10% on a product can end up in the tens of thousands. We'll add a small chunk onto the end sale, especially because tariffs are paid by the importer, which will be prohibitive for companies moving their cars from GB to the EU or the other way around. So if you're selling the car to another company to sell, or even if I think you're moving it on from your EU subsidiary to your UK subsidiary, you're potentially going to have to pay a tariff on it, which is difficult because it might be a while till you make anything off the actual car. More than a dozen battery factories are expected to open across Europe this decade to cater for the growing number of electric vehicles made in the region, but the car makers say promises by the chemical and battery industry for a swift increase in production have not been met. "We were sold a pup by the chemical industry," said one person familiar with the talks. Now that's quite an English phrase to use, so I wonder if the person they interviewed here was English rather than European, because the phrase "sold a pup," I've heard people use that in England, but nowhere on the continent. It looks like the industry was not ready, so an extension could make sense, or either side can tell industry to suck it up because they knew about the deadlines. Also, would other industries ask for similar exemptions or extensions? So much for the German car industry bailing us out, huh? However, an EU official said Brussels was not open to changes to the rules of origin. They are part of the dedicated balance of the TCA. Stakeholders have been given time to adapt, and they are advised to use the transition time provided. They've still got another year to figure things out. However, neither the UK nor the EU want to request an extension on the exemption. The politics is such that if one side requests, the other will demand something in return. And that last point is probably the answer. I do wonder if the EU could could use this to push more manufacturing to just move to the EU from the UK. It would make sense, as the UK is a smaller market, and they could make it up to these companies with some subsidies. I'm not sure, but politics is in the way here. But again, this is one of those things that probably does benefit the EU to keep, however. EU member states could press Brussels into accepting rules of origin changes if London also agrees, but a qualified majority of members would have to vote for a change at the Council of European Union. Gianna Mendes, Spain's trade minister, recently told the FT that Madrid would be in favour of the move. I think talking about the extension, Spain is the second largest car maker in Europe by volume, producing 16 electrified models. That's, I didn't know that. We would be sympathetic. We have a value chain between the EU and the UK is the mutual interest for the right rules of origins to be in place. If we import batteries from Asia, that has to be taken into account. It's interesting for a few reasons. If Spain pushed against the extension, they would lose some sales into GB for car sales, but given it would mean less GB cars are in the EU market, giving them more potential sales within the EU. But that part about a value chain is interesting. Maybe despite Brexit, there are raw materials from GB that help with Spanish car manufacturing. Perhaps the bit about chemicals, but that's speculation on my part. But perhaps Spain sells more EVs to Great Britain than I first thought. Not much more to add on this one, but again, this politics kind of getting in the way. But I do wonder if the UK asked for an exemption, what would the EU say? What would the EU ask for in return? And if the EU did it, it would be in the UK's interest, I think, to get this extension, kind of like a mutual beneficiary one. But I don't know, it looks like Brussels has ruled it out, which would make it difficult for the UK to ask for an extension, but I think it makes sense to ask for one, given the industry seems to be in shambles right now. But given that if the EU can make it so that the cars are more manufactured in the EU, it means that they can export to other countries, not just GB. So it'd be interesting to see where they actually go with this. But for now, it looks like it's not great news for the electric car vehicle industry, because they were not ready for Brexit, that's for sure. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.